Hello, my name is Samantha Paul and I'm going to be talking about archaeological archives and their role within spatial planning and economic development. As archaeologists, we excavate a site for research or rescue and we produce a record of that site which is compiled into the site archive, as well as producing a report on our findings or publishing an interpretation in a journal or book. We retain the intellectual rights to the research contained within the reports we write, and we hope that others read and acquire knowledge from our efforts. But what about the archive, the record that preserves the site for future generations after it has been destroyed? What are our hopes for that? And have we actually even thought about it at all? For the large part, as archaeologists, we are not the eventual keepers of the archive we produce, having passed them on to museums for care and conservation, and often therefore out of our consciousness. We assume that museums would simply take the fruits of our labours without question, care for the archives, curate them, disseminate them, make use of them for display, teaching and research, and facilitate public access to the knowledge that we have created for the communities which we apparently created them for. But recent research suggests that this is not what is actually happening. Museums across Europe are reporting a space crisis, with many institutions unable to accept more material into their already overcrowded stores, and contracting units unable to deposit their archives, holding large collections in poor and inaccessible conditions. It is not just a lack of room, curators report, but also a lack of reuse of the archaeological archives that reach their stores by archaeologists, academics, or members of the public. Which begs the question, what and who are they storing them for? The situation surrounding the storage of and access to archaeological archives is considered by professional groups to be at a tipping point, and many museums as custodians of this resource are questioning the cost of storage for posterity against their value and access in the present. The discussions around archaeological archives and sustainability have been instigated for the large part, not by the archaeologists that create them, but by the museums which curate them. The various attempts to address the archiving crisis by museums are detailed in my blog. By questioning the value of retaining the entire archaeological record, these projects have brought to light the tensions between the different groups that make up the archaeology community, with little agreement as to who should be taking responsibility for tackling this crisis, and as far as I can see, no consultation with the public or the communities which the archives are supposedly representing. Many archaeologists respond angrily to suggestions of selecting material for retention or discard, or questioning the long-term value of what they have taken from the ground or recorded on a context sheet. Rescue, the British Archaeological Trust, has called for the archaeological profession's explicit rejection of the dispersal, deaccessioning and discard of existing archives so that Britain is not to lose a substantial proportion of its unique and irreplaceable archaeological heritage. There seems to be a fundamental misunderstanding, therefore, between archaeologists and the people who look after the products of their work. Many archaeologists see selection of the archives as the museum attempting to cherry-pick the best bits, that they are only interested in the shiny, displayable parts of the archaeological record, whereas archaeologists, specialists and researchers argue that it is in the numbers of objects, the bags and bags of pottery sherds, and the repeatable and comparable assemblages that the real studies into material culture and past societies take place. It is not the case that museum curators do not understand the value of these large assemblages, I think. It is just that they are judged on their footfall and engagement figures, and the archaeological objects which assist with that are the displayable, shiny and exceptional finds, not the bulk objects. This disconnect is further exemplified by the commercial archaeologists' response to the museums increasing their box deposition charges. One of the largest units in the UK referred to the situation as the museums having a monopoly on the market, in effect that museums were attempting to profiteer from the work of archaeologists. The same unit then questioned how the museum would respond if the units were to get together and open their own museum to house the archives. This lack of understanding on the part of the archaeologists as to the issues faced in the museum sector is balanced by what they consider a highly variable and therefore costly deposition process imposed on them by the museums. Unhelpfully, several archaeological units have suggested that despite the rise in box deposition fees, it is still cheaper for them to simply bag up everything and send it to the museum, rather than go through the costly and time-consuming process of selecting the material and information most valuable for retention, while at the same time documenting that which has been disposed of. This means that once again, the museums receive large, inaccessible and unusable archives that will do nothing but slowly rot in their basement. No wonder they are frustrated with the commercial archaeology community. My blog has further details of a current project which is attempting to utilise funds from the Community Infrastructure Levy to support the curatorial care of archaeological archives. In an attempt to control what they receive in an archive box, individual museum services are producing increasingly complicated and strict deposition standards. These are in addition to the national and European-wide standards already in existence. Most recently, CDOC, an international standard for the creation of archaeological archives, has been produced by ICOM, the International Council for Museums. This was as a direct result of the issue of universities conducting projects abroad and taking the records and in some cases the artefacts out of the country to complete the research. Museums have reported that very few of these archives are ever deposited, and in many cases they are lost forever in university basements and storerooms. But what do the issuing of all these standards actually achieve? I suppose it is possible that commercial units and research bodies may compile their archives in a way that is easier for museums to understand, but it does not solve the main problems of storage and conservation, or facilitate engagement or reuse, or address the purpose of an archive created solely for the fulfilment of a planning condition. Clearly, evidence that all archaeological material should be kept in perpetuity has yet to be demonstrated. The current situation allows for archives to degrade in basements, go mouldy in sheds, and be lost forever to the skip when a retired professor's office cupboards are finally cleared out. It is time that the value held within these archives as either public assets, museum collections, or simply tools for archaeological research is addressed. I would ask, why are we keeping these archives and for who? And as the only record of archaeology and its role in spatial planning and economic development, shouldn't we as archaeologists consider their purpose right from the outset?